Hi everyone, welcome back to Horseplay. So today I'm just going to give you a little update on how we're getting on with our barn.
I'm Nikki Ross, equine behaviourist specialising in horse-human interactions up here in the beautiful Highlands of Scotland.
So the barn project has been ongoing for a year now, and we started off with this steel you can see behind me here, lots of rusty steel that we got second hand, and we've been transforming it into a barn. Now it's not quite done yet, so wait for the next video for when that's completely finished. But I want to show you this little bit that I'm in the process of creating now. So this corner here has got limestone on it at the moment, and what my plan is to turn all of this area here into a big sand pit. Now the reason I've chose this area is because this is where the sun hits most of the time in the mornings when the ponies like to have their little sleep. So we're very careful to be aware of their time schedules and create our day around what their natural patterns are. And usually after they've had their hay, or if they've had any additional feed in the morning, they'll go and have a little sleep for a bit. Or after we've been out for a walk, they'll come and have a sleep for a bit. And at those times, often the sun is on this ground here. And what I was doing is putting interlocking rubber mats out for them to sleep on, which were okay. They actually worked quite well. But when there's a bit of a breeze, they blow away and they won't last forever. I mean, we had ours 2 years and they were great, but they were getting thinner, they were getting compacted. So Bonnie in particular likes to sleep outside in the sun. So that area will become sand, quite coarse sand. I put a lot of drainage underneath it. We've sorted out drainage from other roofs that was coming down here, making this wet. So hopefully that will now be the sand pit where they can sleep. That's the theory. Hopefully we'll get that sorted within the next year and I can show you around. So this is the rest of the barn so far. You can see it's fairly massive. It's 8 metres by 9 metres. Initially I wasn't going to put any sides on at all. I was going to keep it completely open. But then because the land has a little dip, we're up on the top of a hill but within a forest, and we're in a dip, a basin, which means that the weather tends to swirl around. And when it does that, it comes straight into the barn. So we're going to have more sides. We're going to block up here. We're going to block up here. But the other part of it was that Pixie in particular loves to stand and look out. So we decided to leave a window here. And this is going to be perspex, we think, will be the next development. So that she can stand here and look out at the kids' massive trampoline, but at the woods and the deer and the pine martens and the otters that come into there. You can see we're putting drainage in here. We just ran out of piping, but this is drainage that will come off the roofs straight into the burn. We also have drainage over here from a pipe that goes across the land that needs digging in, but this is actually going to go into a runoff area. You can see around the pond there's lots of rushes. We want this water to go through that runoff area so that any extra nutrients don't go straight into the water table. They get absorbed by the plants first of all, because that will be coming through land that has horse manure on it as well. The shipping container here, this was on the land when we bought it, and it actually formed the basis of the last 2 shelters. Very first one we had to put up as an emergency shelter because the weather was so horrific when we first moved in, and we literally just had a tarpaulin go into a wooden bar and the ponies went into the tarpaulin. The container opened at the end, it opened over here in this door, and it wasn't safe for them to come in and out that way, so we made a shelter off it. After that we took the roof that's over it at the moment and put it on the front, and that formed the shelter, and that worked really well. We had we used the rubber curtains for the fly protection, and I created a mesh as well and put it on the front, and that formed the shelter, and that worked really well. Those things are coming back, but in a different format to suit this space. But now we've taken the front out of the shipping container, we've sealed up the door at the side, and that's now my storage shed for bedding and for hay through the winter. We've put poles on it so that I can just step over to get stuff and step out rather than wrestling with ponies and gates and things. For those of you who have been around horses for a while, gates have become a pet hate of mine. Having to lift them or work away with really difficult hinges or fastenings whilst you've got a horse, or whilst you've got nets or water buckets or whatever it might be, are a real pain. So one of my big specifications for this barn was it has to have amazing gates that I can unlock with one arm. We're not quite there yet. These are the amazing gates awaiting to be placed over there between those two amazing posts which need cutting down. But I have been assured that they will be openable and closable. Even when they swell up in the weather that we have, they'll work well. Now, we did do a sneaky extra gate here. We made this out of the hazel that we have around the property. So you coppice hazel, you take out key branches, and it helps the rest of the plant to grow. It's a very lovely wood to work with. So we made this gate. I'll put you a little tag on how we did this. Dowelled it into the bottom there. Now this is closed because the ground on the other side is quite wet in the winter, and I don't want them to have general access to that. They will have access to it in the summer when it dries up, and they can help get those rushes down on the land as well. But I don't want them always having access that way, hence the gate. So at the back of the barn here, see we haven't quite finished the back there, we have the muck heap. Now, this is quite complicated to do. So this is the roof that's on here is a roof that was on barn Mark II when we were putting something up for the ponies. So we just moved it across. We've made the muck heap itself out of pallets, and we've actually put drainage underneath that stone all the way around. So it's at the bottom of a hill, so the water just ran down and straight into the muck heap. So the two things we've done, we've put a pipe in here that takes water from the hill there. So the pipe is in there, it goes under the ground and comes out the other side over there, and it will help drain some of the other land. And then we've also lifted the muck heap up onto pallets and put wood on top, so that any water that does make its way over there disappears underneath. And we positioned it so it's on top of this seam of rock, which is really handy because it means that I don't get muddy feet when I'm coming to muck heap because it's on rock. So we're trying to use the natural resources as much as possible. This is muck from the year before last. It's really well rotted. I'm trying to layer it as much as I can. And it did have drainage pipes going through it. We've just taken those out as we moved everything and we turned everything over. But I'm finding that this is a really lovely compost now to use on the land to help balance that acid level. But also we do sell the amounts that we don't use. If we don't use it on our fruit trees or to help re-establish the land, we can sell it and make some money back, and that goes into the pot for additional forage for next year. Can you hear? You hear that? That's the woodpecker, and today is the first day that I've heard him since the winter. Is he going to do it again? It's so lovely. He is my cue that spring is in the air. There he is. And we can start looking forward to everything coming back. My other cue, we have these massive ponds here. So my other signal that spring is coming is there's a very large heron that sits on the other side of the pond. And whenever he comes, I know it's because the frogs are coming back to spawn, because unfortunately he eats all the frogs. So this path started off as a sheep fleece path, because there actually wasn't a path here when we came. It was just a straight cliff face coming here. So what I did was I dug it down. Now it's still slightly steep, I think, for Bonnie, so I'm going to play around with that a little bit. But I started to pile sheep fleece and branches and sheep fleece, this sheep fleece lasagna thing, to create a path up here on top of the peat bog, which is underneath it. I didn't want to dig into the peat. This is really precious landscape and I want to preserve it as much as I can. So instead I layered this on top, and then that's about an inch thick, that stone. But it's not at all squidgy, it's perfectly hard. And you see the grass is growing over it, which is what I want. I want it to disappear into the environment. Here's my feet. It's not squidgy at all, perfectly solid. But it has meant that I haven't had to put loads and loads of stone down. And again, this is limestone. Limestone is great for their feet, but it's also the area that we're in. We have a lot of problems with rhododendron, and rhododendron makes the soil acidic. The lime helps to neutralise that, so that other plants have got a chance to grow that aren't so acid loving. So that's why we've gone with the limestone. A little bit I want to show you. This is our hay house. So I don't want to feed hay in the barn, because otherwise I'll just stand in the barn the whole time. So we've created a hay house out of the old shed. Hay will go in the middle and they can stand under. However, there's a problem with this, that when it gets really, really wet and we get that swirly wind I mentioned earlier, the rain just goes straight underneath. Even though it's quite low, it's Shetland pony height, the rain still goes underneath. So I need to have a little rethink about the roofing, and yeah, what I'm going to do to make that a bit better. It's not a problem all of the time, just when we get this particularly swirly wind. And then the rest of the land. So we have a little bridge here, digging a lot of ditches, a lot of drainage, to help just balance the moisture levels in the land. But then they'll have, back in the forest, they'll be able to go up wherever they need to. And we're very careful how we manage that, so that the land and the horses and us are working in harmony. Here's an example of that sheep fleece track. So this is a little area of the pathway that they go out into the forest. That we tend to have rows of like seams of rock, very hard rock, with seams of peat bog in the middle. So this was a spot that was all peat bog, and as we were walking through it, they were just destroying the ground. It was getting really wet, churned up, nothing else could grow. So I've just put a small stretch of the sheep fleece track on that piece there between the rock, so that in the end you end up with this thick layer that starts to bind together and provides a platform over the mud, so it doesn't sink into the mud, it goes solid on top. And we actually did this down around the barn when we first moved in, and we had to dig it up to move bits back and put the foundations in for the barn, and we found we couldn't dig it up. It was so hard and so knitted together that we just laid everything on top instead. So if you're looking for a good surface covering to create a path or a base for a path, and you've got access to lots of fleece, it doesn't have to be good quality fleece, any fleece, bits of fleece. Most of this is bits of fleece, not whole fleeces. It really is a game changer. It's a really, really helpful resource, and it's often just buried by farmers. They don't get any money for it. Nothing else they can do with it. So it's a handy little thing to grab. It does look like we're pretty close to finishing now. I'm quite happy. I feel like we're coming to the end. Well, We're never at the end, but we're definitely getting closer. If you are interested in learning more about how we can use our understanding of horses' ethology, their natural behaviours, to create an environment and a management system that meets their ecological needs, feel free to follow us on here. Now we also have an online learning hub which teaches owners all the things they need to know about their horses to be able to build a closer, horse-centred, force-free approach to training, to building a relationship, to management. So if that's something you'd like to learn more about, I'll put a little link in the description below. Just click on there.
And we'll see you soon.